See, Jesus didn't meet the Pharisees' expectations for the Messiah. And because he didn't meet their expectations, they refused to acknowledge all the work that he was doing and all the truth that he was speaking. Right? It's the same thing that happened in Nazareth. It says that they were amazed at his miracles and they were astonished at his words, but that they refused to believe him because he was Jesus. He was Mary and Joseph's son. He was their brother-in-law. They watched him grow up. And so rather than walking in, rather than grabbing hold of being amazed, they sort of leaned on what was familiar. They let what they were uncomfortable with get in the way of the fact that it was God himself that was making him uncomfortable. The Pharisees demanded that Jesus meet their expectations rather than humbling themselves and considering that God's desires, God's plans, God's purposes were different than theirs. Don't many of us struggle with that too? Don't many of us still struggle with, why isn't it the way I thought it would be? Why isn't it the way I hoped it would be? Why isn't it the way it is for them? Why is it that I've been waiting and they didn't even wait long? Why is it that I'm busier than they are? Why do they keep getting rewarded? When are you going to do this for me? And then we even misappropriate the scriptures and we jump into the Psalms and we're saying, how long, O Lord? When the only thing that bothers us is we're not getting our way. Because God continues to be moving in our hearts and moving in our lives and moving in our community. See, if life isn't what we expected, sometimes we refuse to see what God's doing. We refuse to acknowledge how he's working. We refuse to humble ourselves and seek his kingdom rather than our way. Let's just think about the Pharisees for a minute. They would have been pleased to have Jesus come to do miracles, defeat Rome, and reestablish Israel as the most powerful nation on earth. That's what they expected, that's what they wanted, and that's what they were holding out for. And so when Jesus didn't do that, they rejected Jesus because they wanted what they wanted more than what he came to bring. But think about this. If they got their way, if they got their way, they would have enjoyed this life but perished in the next. If they got their way, Israel would have been restored on earth, but not for eternity. If they got their way, the nations would have been Israel's permanent enemies rather than their everlasting brothers and sisters. If they got their way, they would have lost so much more than they could have ever dreamed. If they got their way, Jesus' words, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul, would have been theirs for all of eternity. So then let me ask today, what if the same is true on a smaller scale for us? What if right now, today, getting what we want costs us what God has planned? What if our disappointment, our frustration, or even our anger over not getting our way is the thing that's in the way of seeing how God is working? Of seeing what God, or hearing what God is saying, and seeing what God has planned?